Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you for agreeing to do this oral interview with us. My name is Mosunmola Ogunmolaji, and we are from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is March 18, 2024, and we're currently at the village at Gainesville, and I'm interviewing Miss Ellen Schmidt. Miss Ellen, could you tell us what is your full name and could you spell it out?
Okay.
Yeah.
Ellen Maria Schmidt, Ellen, Maria, Maria, Schmidt, Schmidt.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? When were you born and where were you born?
I was born in Melbourne, Florida in 1943 in the hospital there. And my actual home was not in the city. It was south in a little place called Micco, Micco. And it's halfway between Melbourne and Vero Beach, right on the US 1 highway. And the Indian River is on the east side, and our home was on the west side.
Thank you for that very clear, description of the location. Could you tell us a little more about, life growing up and as a little child in Florida?
Well, life was, when I started out my life, when I was born, my father was drafted right after I was born. And my parents actually lived on a farm that belonged to my grandparents. And they had to sell all the animals and everything. And Dad was sworn in January. I was born in November. He was, called up and had to leave. And so he wanted my mother to live with his parents in the house where they lived, which was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. And it was very difficult for my mother to move in. This was not her family, Yeah. And but my grandmother was ill, and my dad wanted mother to help with that. And anyway, it was on an orange grove called Chief Micco Groves. My grandfather was the manager of the grove, and so he had to work. So someone had to be there. And anyway, he was my surrogate father for 2 years of my life. My dad left in 1944 and came back in 1946. So my grandfather was very special to me because he was, he would carry me around and when I cried and help my mom. And it was a rural area. It's not an incorporated area, never has been, probably never will be. It was just far from town, and I had to ride the school bus to school. I started when I was 5 because my birthday's in November. I turned 6 then, and the school bus ride was an hour each way. The first year I had to ride the bus with children all the way from 1st grade to 12th grade. And because it was rural, we didn't have that many people, and the bus picked people up all over the place. And then we had to stay after school because the band had to practice, the football players had to practice. And so I didn't get home until 5 o'clock in the evening, which was a very long day for a 5-year-old child. It was exhausting. And I was very anxious about it because dealing with all these, I was a rural kid and I'd never been around a lot of people. So having to be on the bus with all these people was very traumatic to me. I was very anxious. I chewed on my sweater and my sleeves were eaten up. I ate on the end of the pencil because we had a big pencil that didn't have an eraser to learn to write with, and I ate my pencils. I was just a wreck. And sometimes I got car sick in the bus and threw up, and Mother had to come to town to get me. And she didn't like that. After a while, she refused to come, and I had to deal with it. So the bus, things began to change because Melbourne became an area where more people came in to live. And it was a small city, and the space program was beginning to develop. And a lot of people came into that area. Some very high-tech companies started their business there. And so there was an influx of construction people, an influx of really highly technical people. And the technical people wanted excellent schools for their children. So they started on a We've Got to Build Schools program. So in the first grade, I was in one building. In second grade, I was in this. There were 3 big buildings on the campus there for the and when my father went to Melbourne High School, there was elementary, junior high, and high school, and the buildings were still there, but they were converted into something else. So I was in the second building in my second and third grade. And the fourth grade, they had to rent a room in a church across the street. So I went fourth grade across the street and had to walk over to the cafeteria on the campus. And then fifth and sixth grade, fifth and sixth grade, we went out to where the new high school was being built, and they had finished 2 wings. So they put the fifth and sixth graders in the 2 wings that were finished. And then, let's see, it was fifth and sixth grade. And seventh grade, I went back to the third building, and we had junior high school there. And then when I was in the ninth grade, we went to a junior high school that had been built new. And then my 10th, 11th, and 12th, the high school was open. So I got to go to the brand new high school. But it was chaotic to be changing all the time from one place to another. It was really, but I liked school and I enjoyed school. And then the high school, the school board employed a new principal. He was out of graduate school, and he felt that high school students should be able to do advanced work. And so he compiled a wonderful bunch of teachers and transformed the high school into this wonderful school. And we had so many opportunities. They had the regular classes, but they also had advanced classes. I was able to take second-year biology. I was able to take zoology. And we used the same textbook that the University of Florida students used. And I also was able to take physiology. And then I took Spanish and French, 2 years of each, but they also had available Greek and Russian, and they also had Latin too. But one of the teachers spoke 5 languages. So we had a wonderful opportunity. There were a lot of advanced math classes, and there was a biology research group of students. It was a wonderful school. So I graduated in 19. What year did I graduate? 61. Okay. 61. That's excellent. And I had applied to nursing school in Orlando, and I went to Orange Memorial Hospital School of Nursing for 3 years. It's a diploma school. And we lived on the campus, and we were slave labor. We had to do a lot of things. They didn't have to hire so many people because they had the students to do the work,
Yeah.
So I didn't think that I really liked it after the first semester, but I'm I'm going to do this type of person. So I said, well, I'll always make the grades. They'll never kick me out. So I graduated from there, but I spent 3 years there. And then I had met my husband when I was 14. Oh. And at my godmother's house, and we had dated off and on. He graduated from Vero Beach High School in 1958, and he was salutatorian of his class, and came to U of F to do a 5-year aeronautical engineering course. And it turned into be aerospace engineering by the time he was finished, because they changed the name of it. But anyway, he spent 5 years here getting his bachelor's degree. Oh, wow. And we still kept dating off and on. During the summers, he would come down to Vero Beach and work for Piper Aircraft Company. And I would always had a month off in the summer from nursing school, so we got to see each other then. And then sometimes I would come up for homecoming or just for a visit when I was in nurses training to visit him. And we got engaged in 1963 and got married in 64, right after I graduated from nurses training.
Yeah, thank you for the breakdown. You've given us like a really good breakdown of like your educational background and up till like meeting your husband and all of that. But if we could just go back a little bit and talk about, your family. I know you talked about your grandfather and, the relationship you had with him. Yeah, if you could tell us briefly about like the family, sort of like the family tree, like the names of your grandparents and then your parents and your siblings too, if you had any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start with my paternal grandfather, the one that I was closest to. He has a nice, interesting life story. He was born in England in Foulness Island, which is in Essex, it's an island in the mouth of the Thames River. And his mother had 15 children, and she raised 14 of them. One of them died in infancy it was only a couple months old. So she raised 14 children and some of them had 12 children. And my grandmother was in Ripley's Believe It or Not because she had so many descendants. I have a paper here that I wrote up about her. And apparently she was a wonderful person. And even after she raised all those children, she took more children in. But anyway, that's a lot of children, and there wasn't always work for them. I have a picture here of, these are my great-grandparents in England.
The names?
The names are James and Eliza Hume, Hume. Okay. And then this is their youngest child. This is Elizabeth Hume with her two parents, James and Eliza. And this is a picture of a lot of the kids. My grandfather is in the piece that looks like it's been torn off. You really can't see him over here.
Okay.
I don't know, it got water damaged or something, but that's some of the children. Elizabeth wasn't even born yet, so that's what it looked like. And then this is a picture of Elizabeth. We went to meet her, and my grandfather's youngest sister. In 1981, she was 90 years old. Wow. So, but my grandfather immigrated to Canada to find work, and to Toronto, and he worked up there, and he did all kinds of things. He was a lumberjack at one point. He helped dig the sewers of the city. He was, whatever he could find, he worked at it. And then he was in his late 30s, and he found out one of his brothers had married, one of his brothers had gotten married, and he had a sister who was living in Toronto. And so they got together and met each other, got married. And she had immigrated she was born in Prittlewell, it's a town in Essex in England. And I don't know exactly what date she immigrated or anything, but she went to Canada. And she worked, I think, for a family for a while. And then she worked in a big department store in Toronto. Anyway, they got married in 1915 and bought land in Florida and came down to Florida to find their land was underwater. Wow. They had been scammed. So then it's like, okay, they went to Boynton, and my dad, James Alfred Hume, was born there. And my grandfather was Alfred Hume. With so many children, he didn't have a middle name. And my grandmother was Ellen Maria Hunsdon, Hunsdon, was the way she spelled her name. And then when they were married, she was Ellen Maria Hume. And so living in Boynton, they were, he was my grandfather was working again. He knew how to grow vegetables. He and another guy grew some tomatoes and sold them. And then there was a freeze, and then all the tomatoes froze. And he started working on helping to unload rocks off of train cars because they were making new roads. And he did that. And then he and a bunch of other guys, I think it was 5 of them, decided to go to West Virginia and work in the coal mines. So they went to West Virginia, a little place called Rhonda, I think. They moved several times anyway. And he got up there, and they drove up by car. They slept outside on the way up because they couldn't afford a place to sleep. And they stayed up there. He got himself established, and then he had my grandmother and my dad come up on the train. And it was awful because everything was black with the dust from the coal. The snow was black. It was always coal dust in the air. And so he worked there, and then I think he got tired of it. For health reasons, he quit working in the coal mine, but he knew how to grow things, and so he started farming. They moved from one little town to another, and in the same area, and he started growing different kinds of vegetables, and he would send my dad out with a wagon to sell things door to door, and he also supplied things to some grocery stores. And then the man who owned the coal mine also owned the orange grove in Florida. And he saw that my grandfather was very skilled at growing things. So he asked him if he would come and manage the orange grove. And of course they said yes, because they didn't like being up there in the coal mine area. So they came back down to Florida by train. And of course my father had no memory of being in Florida. And they came to Mico, which is this little town, but there was a way to get off the train there. And my dad always said when he got off the train, he thought the orange blossoms were blooming, and he thought he'd come to heaven. Oh. He was 8 years old, and he was so happy. But while they were in West Virginia, my uncle was born, and his name was Robert Sidney Hume, and he was born in Rhonda, West Virginia. And so they came all with 2 children then. So they had a house was provided with the grove. So they had the 2-bedroom, 1-bath house there. And Grandpa did a great job, I guess, with the grove because he was there for a long time. And my dad, and my uncle thrived. They were boys. They were, they learned to shoot guns and fish. There was a great big long pier or dock, whatever you called it, at one time, and they'd go out there and fish on there, and they always had a boat, and they could go out in the river and on the boat, and so they had a really great childhood. They always had a dog of some kind. And my grandmother was a wonderful cook. Her father in England was a baker. He had his own business. And so she was a wonderful cook. She made cream puffs and all kinds of fancy things. And then my dad graduated from Maribona High School, and he started working at a company called Couch Manufacturing. They made great big huge irrigation pumps that they used in the fields to transfer water from one place to another. They were so big a man could stand up inside of them. They were huge. And he started working there. And he didn't make much money, but he was very handy with his hands and a mechanical mind. Mr. Cabell, who owned the Grove and the coal mine, had a house there by the Grove, big, beautiful home up on the hilly area. And he had offered to send my father to college, but my grandparents were too proud to accept that kind of help. And my dad was kind of a goof off in school. He'd rather look like the shop class more than he liked the scholastic part of it. But he was very smart. He could have done it if he'd put his mind to it. So then he had a lady that worked at the place where he worked, couch manufacturing. She worked in the office as a secretary, and he said, "Is there anybody that I could date that you know?" And she was good friends with my mother at church. And he said, yeah, I know somebody. So they went, he thought it was kind of a blind date for my mom because she didn't know my dad. And she and another friend were walking down the road when they came to pick her up. And in Sebastian is where she lived. And they came to pick her up. And my dad said, "I hope it's the short one." And my mother was short. My dad was 6 feet tall. My mother was 5 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, they dated for 7 years before they got married. So my mother was in her 30s. My dad was close to that when they got married. So then they lived several different places. And I already told you they lived on a farm at one time. And then my dad got drafted. And he came back after the war and started working at the same place. And mother, she really always thought he could do better than working there. But he knew the people knew him. He knew how to do the work. And it was very heavy, hard machinery work, very difficult work. So, but living out in where we lived, I was a very curious child. I'm still a curious person. I'm interested in all kinds of things. So I would go, and our house was, my uncle and my dad bought a piece of land, 5 acres, split it down the middle, put in a well after the war. My uncle had saved all his money when he was in the Navy because he didn't have a wife and he didn't get off the ship. And he saved all of his money and he had money saved up. And they bought this piece of property right on US 1, like I said, and right on the river, and built 2 houses. It was all done, just a bunch of guys got together and built these wooden houses together. And they built my uncle's first because his need was greater than ours. And then they built a second house, and we moved there in 1949, probably. And my grandmother died in 1944. So that was when my father was in the war, and her other son was in the Navy. So nobody was home when she died. So my grandfather was left with my mom and me. And but he came with us when, retired, and came with us to the new house. So we had 3 bedrooms and 1 bath, and a little living dining area and a kitchen, and eventually a porch, and eventually a garage. It was pretty basic. But I really missed the house that I'd grown up in. I was really sad for a while because it was hard for me to get used to being in a new place, even though I had gone down there a lot when the houses were being built. But I still felt strange,
What did you miss about the house?
I don't know. The comfort of it, the just knowing about it, and everything was different here, and but my aunt and uncle lived next door to us, and they had 4 children: Robert Sidney Hume, and Patricia Lillian Hume, and Janet, I can't remember her middle name, Hume, and another son, William, and they were my kids next door, but I was old. I was the oldest grandchild, so I was a little older than most of them. And so we didn't really engage with each other, and we had a strict rule. We couldn't just go over there and knock on the door at any time. We had to be invited. So we were not allowed to just go over there. And so that was a very strict rule in the family. But we did have, some food together every once in a while. And my mom was much older than my aunt. So there was not much of a real good relationship there. But I always, my dad had a little boat made for me when I was early teens, and I called it Jare, Jaree. It was using the family initials, and it was a little rowboat, and I had my own little rowboat, and I could go out on the river anytime I wanted to. And I had a crab trap I would put the bait in and check for crabs. And then the back part of our property was all left wooded. They didn't clear it. And I could go up in the woods anytime I wanted to and explore. And, I wanted to know the names of all the plants and the animals, everything I saw. And so I entertained myself by doing that. And I was an avid reader also. We had a little library that we could go to. It was in another town, but we could do that. And so I had an interesting childhood, but I always felt a little other than the kids that I went to school with because I lived out in I was envious of the town kids. And I guess some of them were envious of me and my freedom. But, like I had one little friend and like we went to, early elementary school and her mother starched her dresses perfectly. We all had to wear dresses and her bows were perfect. And I had to stand by the road in the humid weather. Even if my mother had been interested in starching my clothes, my bows hung down before I could get to school. So I always felt a little, and then in the area we lived in during the time I was growing up, there was another area that the Micco is right close to the Sebastian River, and there's a big bridge that goes over that. And if you turned right, there was a road that went back away from the river and curved way around. And there was a group of people who were well off that built homes on the river, and their children went to school with us. So there was always a demarcation between the kids that lived on the highway and the kids that lived in the nice houses. And then there was a group of kids that were really, really poor. So it was this mix of kids on this school bus that, we had to get along with. But, and let's see. Keep going.
Yeah, sure.
I need to stop.
I know you said a lot about life growing up and all of that, but do you have any fun memories or stories about childhood that you would like to share with us?
Oh, I guess my other grandmother lived in Sebastian. I didn't talk about her, but her name was Bessie Elizabeth Taylor, Taylor, and my grandfather, Charles Eli Taylor. And we went to their house a lot too. That was my mother's parents. And so we went there a lot. And Granny was a good grandmother. She had clothes in her trunk that we could dress up in, and her high heels, and she let us play with her makeup. So one of my cousins, Christine, also lived in Micco. Christine Marie Taylor she was 6 months younger than me, so we were pretty close. We did a lot of things together. And the two of us would get an opportunity to go to Granny's, and we would dress up and pretend we were grown-up people with our high heels on. And she had one slinky dress that my cousin could get into, but I was a little too chubby for that. So that was fun, going to Granny's. And she was a wonderful cook. She made homemade rolls every single week. And the first thing we do was go right in the front door, go into the kitchen, get a roll out, and put cinnamon and sugar on it and butter and eat it. I mean, she always had that for her grandchildren. She was really a great granny. And she was really nice. And my grandfather was a little bit stern, but he could be fun too once in a while, But they had come from Iowa. She was born in Missouri. Families were right on the border between Missouri and Iowa. And so she had come. They have an interesting story too. My grandfather was in his late teens, and his grandfather, who was Grandpa Dukeshire, his name was Charles Dukeshire. He was my grandfather's grandfather, and his last name is spelled Dukeshier. He was born in Nova Scotia, in New Brunswick area, and came down to Ohio. The family, or him, I don't know, married a woman there, ended up in Iowa as a farmer. And in his 70s, he wanted to come to Florida. And so he went to his sons and he asked his sons, I'm going to go to Florida. And they wouldn't come. And he'd already been after his wife for years that he wanted to come to Florida, and she would not come to Florida. And when she died, he decided it was his chance. So he asked his grandson, my grandfather, Charles Eli, if he would come to Florida. And he said, sure. But, and they talked about it and decided that maybe they needed to have a woman along to do the cooking. So my grandfather had been dating my grandmother, and he went and said, let me go ask Bessie. So he went and asked Bessie, and she said yes. So they got married and came to Florida on the train with Grandpa Dukeshire, and he had bought 10 acres of land on the Sebastian River. And they put in all kinds of, they had pineapples was their main thing, and they put in citrus trees. But first they had to clear the property. And then they cleared the property. They had a lot of lumber, and they took the trees to a sawmill, had them cut into boards, and then they brought the boards back and they built a house out of that. And then, and my grandmother did all the cooking and the housework and all that. And my mother was born in Roseland, which is the name of the town where they actually ended up on the river. And she was born in 1912. And her name was Rosalie, Rosalee, Rosalie Hume, Taylor. Rosalie, I can't remember her middle name, just a second. Thelma. Rosalie Thelma Taylor was her maiden name. And then my grandparents eventually had 3 more children. When it came time for my mother to go to school, the schoolhouse was like 3 miles, and she would have had to walk through the woods to get to school. And my grandmother says, no, she's not walking through the woods. I mean, this was mosquitoes, snakes, everything. It was, awful conditions there. And so my grandfather got a job working in a grove for somebody in Sebastian. And so they moved to Sebastian. So all the children could walk to school there. It was about a mile there, and it was on a paved road, so they could, go to school. So they lived the rest of their life in that little house. It was a tiny little house, but a little wooden house. And so I'm kind of running down.
But that was good, telling us about like your maternal family background, your mother's family. Yes, I know you talked about like your family and your uncle. Did you have any siblings or?
Me? Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot my sister. Yeah, my sister was born a year after my dad got back from the war. And her name was Rosemary Hume. And she doesn't have a middle name. Okay. So, because her first name was so long. And Rosemary was a very different child from me. She wasn't the adventurous type at all. She was very quiet. And I was kind of a bully, I'm afraid. And but we shared a bedroom in the new house. Well, we shared a bedroom in the house. My dad came back from the war, and we lived in the house where my grandfather was on the Grove. And it was 2 bedrooms, and we had 1 bedroom full of a bed for my parents, a bed for me, and a bed for my sister. It was a crib for her and a youth bed for me. So it was the wall-to-wall beds. That's another reason we moved to a different place, because I would need that extra bedroom. But anyway, and so Rosemary was almost 4 years younger than me. And she was a very shy, quiet person and liked to read. And she was brilliant. She was very academic. And she, in our school, in our elementary school, the smartest kids got the best teachers. And the kids knew who the smartest kids were, and they knew which were the best teachers. Well, I didn't get the best teachers, but my sister did. Oh. And she was very, very good at academics. And she went on to graduate from high school, and she went to FSU, and she was a math major and graduated in, she started working with computers at the very beginning, when these great big computers, where it took up a whole room, and you had those cards that you had to put into them and all that. And she started working with that. But she was Phi Beta Kappa when she graduated, and she stayed in the industry her whole career. And she married a guy who was got his PhD in chemistry at FSU, but their marriage didn't last very long. He was abusive, and my sister divorced him, and they never had any children. And then she went to Kansas City to work out there for a lingerie company, and ended up working in a hospital as a computer analyst, and stayed with the hospital for a long time. And she came down here back to Florida. She wanted to come back to Florida, and she decided to move to Gainesville.
Oh.
And so she came to Gainesville, and she was able to work from home. Even back then, she was able to work from home and still keep her job in Kansas City. So, and she retired from them, and so she married a second time to a man named John Ellis. They were married, I think, 13 years. He had a son, and my sister had to learn how to be a mom, and he was a very spoiled child, and he was just a handful. And so she ended up divorcing that man too, because he was an alcoholic. She found out after they'd been married that he was an alcoholic. So she didn't want to live like that. And so she divorced him. And
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Just a little bit of recollections. Do you remember any songs that you sang maybe with family while growing up, or anything to bring back those memories?
oh, my grandfather that lived with us was he could play instruments from not from memory, but from he didn't take any lessons. He was just I can't think of the word. Anyway, he played an accordion. He played a tin whistle. I have my grandfather's tin whistle. And he would play little songs, and he liked to dance around, play his music. And we had a piano. I had piano lessons, and my sister did too. And we had a big upright piano. And when we would leave, Grandpa never wanted to go anywhere. But by the time we were in the car and going down the driveway, you could hear he was at the piano playing music, and he would sing these little ditties that he learned in England when he was a kid, like a T-I-O, a T-I-O, a T-I-E-I-O. I don't know what that means. But anyway, he would play these little songs and sing them, and we learned a few little things like that. But when I got to be a teenager, I Elvis was just. I remember the first time I ever saw Elvis. I heard Elvis. We were on a little vacation over on the west coast of Florida, and there was a jukebox there, and I heard that music, and I said, "Hey, this ain't my mom and dad's music. I like this." But my dad liked big band music, and he always had the radio on, so all that music is in my head, But, yeah. And then I had a friend in junior high school introduced me to classical music, and I really love classical music. So I like jazz, all kinds of genres of music. But sing, no.
Did you learn how to play any of those musical instruments?
I played the piano.
Oh.
I had 6 years of piano lessons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Back to your education. I think you said while you were in elementary school, you had to, use the bus. And that sort of made you anxious about, commuting almost to school and from school. Why were you anxious about that commute?
Well, the kids on the school bus could be intimidating, mean, and to a little kid getting on, they would harass me or harass any little kid. Riding the school bus for an hour, kids were not very nice. And it made me anxious, and I was afraid of them because they were bigger than me, and I saw, some fights break out, things like that. So it made me anxious there to do that. But we had a boy when I was, I guess, in junior high school who was a dwarf. His parents had moved into our community. And when he got on the school bus, he was about this tall. And the people were so mean to him. So mean to him because he was different. We would get to school and the kids would make a big circle on the playground and put him in the middle. And then they would call somebody out to fight him on the school grounds. And it made me so angry. I was so angry. So one day somebody was on the school bus. He was in the front and I was sitting close to the front. Somebody was picking on him and I stood up and I said, "Leave him alone." And everybody went, "Oh, Ellen, who's so quiet?" All of a sudden she's up there yelling at us. And they stopped. But I don't know why the school bus driver didn't stop that, But anyway, who knows? But I felt sorry for him, so I stood up for him.
That's great. Having someone speak up for you, that's absolutely great. Also, I think you spoke extensively about your experiences in elementary school and high school, and also going to study nursing at Orlando, Florida. Could you tell us about that and how that led to your career?
Well, you're going to laugh. We had to do, in our senior year, we had to do rotations through different things: obstetrics, pediatrics, surgery, and psychiatric nursing. And for our psychiatric nursing, we had to go to Chattahoochee, which is up in the panhandle here. And it was the state institution for mental illness at that time. And I found that I really liked that. We had to, I think we were there for 3 months. And it was a different kind of rural environment than I had ever anticipated or experienced. The people that worked there were very country type people, But anyway, I enjoyed that. One of the things we had to do was be charge nurse at night in the health ward there. So there I was as charge nurse on a ward with all these crazy people.
What is a charge nurse?
I was in charge of the.
Oh, in charge of. Okay.
Yeah, in charge of the people that work there.
Okay.
And as well as taking care of all the patients, and that was a challenge because the people were mentally ill, and I remember. I had one lady, I can't remember what her name was, but she got out of her bed in the middle of the night to go down the hall to go to the bathroom, and then she couldn't find her way back. And so she went into some other lady's room and scared that lady to death. And I went in there and got onto her and said, "Get back in your room," and took her down to put her in her room. But a lot of people, if they had a family member that had dementia, there was no place to send them. So a lot of them got sent to Chattahoochee because they had dementia and their families couldn't deal with them. So this lady obviously had dementia because she couldn't find her way around. But it was an interesting opportunity. Anyway, when I graduated from school and I got married a week after a nurse's training, and my husband didn't want me to work. So I had to take my boards, my state boards, and I took my state boards and I passed them fine. But he didn't want me to work. And we only had one car. We lived in an apartment. And so I didn't work. And later on, I had an opportunity they were going to put in a mental health facility. And I guess that was 1965, I think, where I lived. We had gotten a house by then. We bought a house. We got a house about 4 months after we were married. We bought a little house in Cocoa, Florida. And it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, had little air conditioner that had been put in the wall. It was supposed to be put in the window banger, well, in the wall. Anyway, it was close to the junior college. And there was an article in the newspaper that they were wanting nurses to take a psychiatric course. And it was a semester course. And we would do our practicum in Orlando, and I guess really Winter Park. And so I thought, oh, this is my opportunity to, go back to nursing. So I took the course and did very well. And my professor said, Ellen, you really need to go on to college. And so I said, okay, but I did apply to work in the facility they were putting up. They wouldn't accept my 3-year diploma. They were only hiring bachelor nurses. So I was just deflated because they wouldn't take my credentials. And I had spent a lot of time in a psychiatric facility. And it wasn't like, but oh no, the nose in the air, they wouldn't accept me. So I said, okay, I'll go back to school. We didn't want any children at that time. And I didn't have any responsibilities. And my husband was gone a lot. He would work long hours. And so I could walk to the junior college. So I went back to school. So I didn't work in my profession. So I changed gears completely. So I didn't want to work in the hospital. I just didn't like that hands-on thing. And I didn't want to work in a doctor's office. So, and they wouldn't take me for the psychiatric nursing. So it's like, okay.
What inspired you to go into psychiatric nursing in the first place?
Oh, I don't know. I had an uncle, my Uncle Joe, my mother's brother, was a manic depressive. We didn't know what that was at the time, but he would get on a manic phase, and that's the only time we ever saw the man. And he was always scheming to buy something and start some kind of a business, and his mouth was going like this, and so I learned about it when I was and I really liked the people that were patients there. We worked in the intake area where they were processing people in. We weren't allowed to work in the really bad wards up there. So I worked in the processing, and you treat them just like they're somebody, and you just, they were okay people to me. Some of them were convicts who'd been put there by the judge for something they'd done. One man had murdered somebody, and but they looked normal, just at a glance. But I guess I like that, being able to listen to someone. Some of them were like, one girl was like a teenager. And she was schizophrenic, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw her face upside down. It was just interesting to me. It's very different.
Wow. And you just followed through, decided to get a diploma. Yeah. You said you went back for training. What was that like, and where did you go after you completed your diploma and you wanted to get a job and you couldn't? You said you had to go for another training. If I got that correctly.
No, I went back to junior college.
Okay.
And I got my degree there. I went part-time for 5 years, I guess, to get my degree from there. And I graduated and was an honor student. I was in the Phi Theta Phi Junior College Honors Society. And then we decided to start a family after I did that. And then after my daughter, I had a son in 1970, and then I had a daughter in 1976.
Okay. And what are their names?
And the son is James Daniel Schmidt.
Okay.
And our daughter is Angela Dawn Schmidt. And so after Angela went to kindergarten, I took some time to do something for myself because I'd been taking care of the children and everything for period of time. So I went and took lessons in stained glass, learned how to do stained glass work. I took 2 or 3 different courses in that. One was a night course at the high school. And I did some other things. And then I decided, University of Central Florida opened a campus in Brevard County in Cocoa, where the junior college was. And I decided to go back to school. And I always in my heart wanted that 4-year degree. And so I said, this is my chance right now. So in 1984, I went back to school.
And what did you study when you went back to school?
A little bit of everything. I'm a curious person, I've told you. So
yeah.
The best thing that I could do for myself and my family was to go liberal studies. So I had to have 5 areas of concentration and so many courses in each area. So I went and did a liberal studies and enjoyed it. I know it was very challenging. I went part-time again. It took me 5 years to get my degree. And I ended up being Phi Kappa Phi and Golden Key honors. So I was very proud of myself that I had kept those grades up. And I studied business stuff, business law, marketing, psychology, all kinds of psychology classes. What else did I take? Anthropology. At one time, I thought I might want to be what do they call them? A social anthropologist or something like that.
Yeah.
Where you're working with a community of people who are from different countries and helping to interpret the culture to other people. I thought I really like to do that. Well, the only school was somewhere in the Midwest for me to do that. Well, I couldn't leave my family and go do that. But I thought being an RN and having a community archaeology or cultural anthropology group course of study, then I would be able to be in a hospital and interpret people's ways of, in different cultures, you treat illness in a different way. And so being able to interpret that to the doctors and the nurses so they could care better for people, that they would understand where these people were coming from. But it never happened. It was a dream.
Yeah. So from about the 1970, where you had your first child, what was it like, raising your children?
Well, I enjoyed it. I loved to read to them, and make out all the animal noises in the books and take them to the library every week. And it was really fun to see them developing and growing. And, we offered them, our son liked to draw. We did early on. My mother was an artist, so he had gotten the creative gene. And my husband would bring home reams of old paper out of the computers, and he had plenty of paper to, and he'd spend hours drawing, and he had a great imagination, which I cultivated and, enjoyed having him around. And he was really fun. And I put him in a preschool that was sponsored by the community college. And you had to work there one day a week in order for your kid to go there. And it was all kind of run by parents. It was fun. So he was 5 when our daughter was born. So it was he was almost 6. There's a big age difference between them. And so I could spend time with him, and then he went to school, and then I had her, and then it was like they were single children, but but they had, our son had art lessons, piano lessons, guitar lessons, and our daughter had piano and dance, of course, ballet and tap and all that. And she was very talented in music, and she ended up being in the band in junior high school, learned to play the oboe. And then when she went to high school, they had enough oboe players, so she took the bassoon and learned it. So when she was in college, she got a little scholarship for her bassoon playing. So she went into the marching band in college, and she played the clarinet. So she played 3 instruments plus a piano.
Yeah.
So my kids were a challenge, but they were, our son was a very, very smart guy, but in a different way from most kids. He was his own little world. He loved Star Wars and anything with imagination in it. He was great. And he lives here in Gainesville.
Oh.
And when he was a teenager, he had long hair and a mustache and, was kind of being like a hippie. And his favorite subjects in high school were AP art and creative writing. And so when it came time for him to decide which college to go to, the counselor at the school suggested that he go to New College in Sarasota, because she knew him over the years. And he applied there, and he was accepted. And it's a unique school. It's patterned after New College in Oxford, England. So what happens there, the students can design their own course of study with an advisor. And his major was comparative religion. And all the students at New College had to write a thesis in their senior year in order to graduate. And he graduated in 1993. And then he just roamed around our country with friends and joined protests and eventually settled in Gainesville. And he worked for the Civic Media Center at one time, and he's a freelance writer and poet. And he's written a chapbook, and he's written a children's book called Billy and Tugboat Sally Forth under the pen name of J.N. Fishhawk. That's his pen name. He's a member of the Writers Alliance of Gainesville. And in 2014, he married his wife, Andrea, who's a social justice attorney. And this is the book that he wrote.
I'm going to zoom in on that. That's great.
Okay. So so I'll put that over there. He's currently working on a follow-up to that book, carrying on the story a little bit more. So, and then I'm going to segue into my daughter, Angela. She was a quiet little girl, but she had a competitive streak. She liked to enter contests and compete in science fairs in elementary school. And when she got to junior high school, in the 9th grade, she got this enormous trophy for having the highest grade point average in the 9th grade. So that was, and then for college, she went to the University of Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama, and she majored in English education. And she loved creative writing, especially poetry. And for her practice teaching in her senior year, she went to New Zealand and served in a school in downtown Auckland. There were students there from all over the islands in that area with last names like this. So it was quite a challenge for her to do that. She lived with a family that, accepted her into their home. And so she's always been adventurous. She graduated from Auburn with highest honors, and she stayed there, and she taught English in a rural school for a while. And then she worked in a store, and then she tutored Korean students. It was her little business. And then decided to get her master's degree from the University of South Alabama in teaching English as a second language, because she really enjoyed the Korean students, and she traveled with us a lot, so she'd been out of the country, so she knows how it feels to be an outsider, and so she can reach out to these students. So she teaches English as a second language in Russell County, Alabama, which is a rural county in Alabama, and she travels between 5 different schools. And she's also mentoring another person who's teaching in 2 of the other schools. And so there's 7 schools that she has to go to. And in 2002, she married her husband, Jim Ellis, and they have 2 children. And he works for Auburn University in cybersecurity. And Jackson's the oldest, is 15, and Daniel is 7. And one of the things that we are most grateful for with our children is that they are compassionate and loving people who reach out to help others.
That's great. Is there any recipe or your favorite recipe to make for family that you like to share, or your go-to, if there's any?
Yeah, my grandmother, Granny Hume, that was the good cook, and she taught my mother. My mother didn't know how to cook when she got married. I don't know what my mother did from the time she graduated high school to when she married my father, because there was like this long span of time. Anyway, she taught my mother to make Yorkshire pudding, which is an English thing. It's just flour and eggs and a little oil, I think it is. Anyway, I haven't made it in a while. And we made it at Christmas time every year. And you used a standing rib roast, and then you used the drippings from that into the Yorkshire pudding. And it was a fun thing to make because you put it in a pan in the oven, and it raises up like this, about all puffy, with the eggs and everything. And then I always made a ceremony out of it. I brought it to the table. Everybody had to be seated, and I brought it to the table. And when you get it to the table, it goes, it flattens down like this, and everybody has to watch it flatten down. That was my fun thing I loved to make. But it was a special thing, Christmas time. That was, gather around and everybody. And it was a traditional family thing because in England they made that, and it was special.
What other fun things do you remember like doing during like festive seasons like Christmas or?
Oh, Christmas. It's kind of a small celebration in my family. We didn't have very much money at all. My dad made very little money at his job. And so we didn't have much money to do much with. But, the anticipation of when I was a kid, what present, what I wanted or something. And it was probably ordered out of the Sears catalog and came in the mail. And so Easter time was always getting dressed up in a new dress. Sometimes it was a homemade dress that my grandmother made or whatever. And, hunting the Easter eggs. And, my aunt and uncle that lived next door had a white rabbit, and I always thought it was him that put the eggs out. So, I just...
Yeah, thank you. Those are like, thinking about those is just like bringing back those memories from growing up and, life with family and all of that. So I'll just take us back a little bit to when you said you went back in to get your degree in liberal sciences. What happened afterwards, after you got your degree?
That's another story. Well, in 1981, I met a woman. I had taken my daughter to the recreational center. I lived on Merritt Island by this time. We had bought a house in Merritt Island, a big house, 4 bedrooms, 2 bath, and garage. Before my daughter was born, we bought that house. So anyway, I took her when she was in preschool to this little recreation center, and she went to a little dance class. And after I took a picnic lunch because it was the picnic area there. So we went onto the playground, and I noticed another lady on the playground, and so I walked over and introduced myself to this woman, and she had her little girl was in the same class as my daughter. And so it was like a 5-week class or something like that. So every week we would see each other in the park and get to know each other. And her name was Shobha Bidet, and she was from India. And we struck up a friendship. And our girls took swimming lessons together. And at one time at the swimming lessons, I had a friend who was from Trinidad, Tobago. Another one was from the Dominican Republic, and Shobha was from India, and there was me. So anyway, we got to be good friends. And one day I was picking my daughter up at school, and Shobha picked her daughter up too, and she looked really tired. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I bought a store in Cocoa Beach, and I'm finding I can't do it by myself. Would you like to work for me?" And I said, "Well, let me think about it." And so I went home and I thought about it, and I thought, I've never. I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do it, but I don't know anything about a cash register." Mm-hmm. And she said, "Neither do I. We'll learn together." So I worked part-time in the store, and I did all the window decorations and the interior displays, and we sold 14-karat gold jewelry and clothing, and kind of resort wear. It was on the beach, and it was in a little strip mall, Publix area, and so I really enjoyed it. I was still going to school too, and I worked part-time, went to school. So I really enjoyed doing it. I found that I had a gift for sales. Mm-hmm. And I could talk, because of all the courses I took, I could talk to anybody about anything. Mm-hmm. Who people came in the store, and the wife was in the dressing room. I could entertain the husband with some, mm-hmm. I could listen to whatever he was. I could ask him questions and, mm-hmm. Keep him occupied while his wife was trying clothes on. But I learned to sell 14-karat gold jewelry, and then we got into diamonds and emeralds and stuff like that. So I learned how to sell all that, and how to, convince somebody that they ought to buy something mm-hmm. in a very subtle way. And I got to go on all the buying trips with her. We went to Miami for the clothing, and we went to Miami Beach sometimes for gold, and we went to Orlando for gold. Mm-hmm. And we had a salesman would come in the store and, would show their merchandise to us, and we would buy from them. And so it was really fun, mm-hmm. learning all that. I stepped into a world that I didn't know existed and thought that I would never want to do, but I really enjoyed it. And Shobha and I, became good friends, and she hired some other people. And when I graduated from UCF, she made me manager. Mm-hmm. So then I was the manager of the store. But even before that, she could go away and I ran the store. She would go to India for a month and I ran the store, because I knew all of the salespeople mm-hmm. and all the vendors, and I knew how to return stuff and, make tags for, anyway, but then I worked for her for 15 years and I really enjoyed it, but my parents needed help. They were in their 80s, and my dad had open heart surgery, and he was never the same afterwards. He spent 26 days in the hospital, and he was in rehab, and my mother couldn't care for him. She was going into dementia. And so I quit my job. Mm-hmm. Very, very difficult for me to do. Mm-hmm. Very hard. I was very angry that I had to quit my job to take care of my parents, but who else was going to do it? Mm-hmm. And Dan, bless his heart, my husband, retired the same year my dad had the surgery. Mm-hmm. And so my husband would go down. I was still working. I worked another year after and my husband would go down and stay with my parents and help them. And I would come down on my days off. And then we realized we just couldn't keep doing this. So we closed our house up on Merritt Island, rented a house close to my parents. And then we spent a year taking care of, my dad got to the point where we just could not manage him anymore, even with an aide. It was just too much. So I said, "Okay, Mom, here's the deal. We're putting Dad in a nursing home on Merritt Island, and you're coming to live with us." So we put my dad in a nursing home, and Mother lived with us. So we would go down and see Dad all the time, but he slowly declined. He spent 2 years there, I think it was, and died there. But and he died in 2000. He was 86. And then Mother lived with us another period of time, but her dementia was getting so bad that I couldn't live 24/7 with dementia. So I put her in a assisted living facility, which was very nice. And she lived there for 6 years. And then she broke a hip. And so then she had to go to a nursing home. She was no longer appropriate for assisted living because she broke the same hip twice. And then in the nursing home, she broke another hip. So but she was in the nursing home in a memory care unit for a couple of years. And then the last little bit, she was out in the regular area. But so she died in 2010 at the age of 98. So that's what happened to my career. But, you know, it was okay. And if I wanted to travel or do something fun, my sister would come down and be with Mom and Dad and stay in my house, and so I could get away for a little bit. You know, she was good about that. I appreciated it.
Yeah. I'm really sorry about your loss. Yeah. Just a little bit about, I know you said you worked for about like 15 years managing the store. What was like some of like your like really good recollections about that time, you know, doing with your sales skills and all of that?
Oh, I had some wonderful experiences in the store. You just never knew who was going to come through that door. Let's see. I had one lady who was, well, you get your special customers, you know, because a lot of the people we were our customers, we catered to the older woman, mature woman, we called it. We had swimsuits year round, always over 1,000 swimsuits in the store year round. And they would come down for the winter time and they wanted their swimsuits. So I learned how to fit people in swimsuits and also tell them very nicely and subtly that didn't really look very good on them. So, you know, we had some characters that came in the store that would, you know, there was one lady that used to come in and we all knew she wasn't going to buy anything. And the other people that worked there would run and hide and leave me to deal with this lady, you know. But I was always kind and I always listened to her. She was just lonely. She just wanted somebody to talk to. My boss had a degree in psychology from India. So she said, we don't just sell things here, we do therapy. So, unlicensed, but anyway, just listening to somebody, you know. And I would show her things, and I knew she wasn't going to buy anything, but that was okay, you know, because I knew where her problem was. You know, she was just lonely. And then some people were like, want to return a swimsuit after they'd had it for a while. Well, legally, you can't do that. The health department won't let you do that. If somebody's worn a swimsuit, it doesn't come back. But this lady tried every which way to get me to take that swimsuit back. And it was all kind of, the back of it was messed up. And I said, you've been taking swimming lessons and leaning up against the swimming pool? Oh, no, I'd never do that. And she was determined to get her money back. And I said, no, ma'am, we can't take it back. You know, the state won't let us take it back. You just, no. So you had to learn how to stand up and let people not run over you. Let's see, some other ones that we've had people come in drunk. Christmas was always fun because the guys would wait till December 24th to come in to buy their wife a gift. And I sold a lot of gold to, you know, these guys who would come in and wanted something nice for their wife. And, you know, always every year it was the same guy loping in. Like, oh God, he would buy anything I put out, you know, and I knew it. And so let's see what else. I did have a guy who performed as a transgender dancer in a nightclub come in. We had beautiful gowns from India with the sequins and everything. Yeah. And he came in one afternoon and wanted to try on a dress. And I said, okay, Ellen, what are you going to do now? There was nobody else in the store. I said, go ahead, you know, try on the dress, take whatever you want. And then I said, Lord, don't let any of my little old ladies come in here. because I could hear him in there going, ooh, and I'd say, oh Lord, please don't let any of my little ladies come in here. And no little ladies came in. And he really, I'll come back and I'll get the dress. Well, he never came back.
No.
I think he came in more than one time, but it was just, he wanted to try the dress on, but he didn't want to really buy it. And I knew that. But I met people from all over the world too. People came to Cocoa Beach because of the space program. We had Russian astronauts. I waited on some Russian astronauts. 2 men came in one time and wanted to buy a swimsuit for their girlfriend, for one of them's girlfriend. And of course, they didn't know what size, and I didn't know what size. And so this is terrible, but we sold mastectomy inserts for swimsuits. We had mastectomy suits. So I laid all these forms out on the counter. And so he closes his eyes. And he's trying to figure out what size. They didn't buy anything, they left. But I got a laugh out of it. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It sure does. So moving on to retirement now. I don't know if I missed out on anything that you would like to talk on before, retirement. Is there any part that I might have missed out? Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh yes. Okay. So I wanted to ask, at what point did you started thinking about retirement and where to sort of leave after retirement?
My husband retired after 35 years in the aerospace industry, launching rockets, and he retired in 1998. And then, we had that period of time of taking care of my parents. Yeah. But we were always travelers. Early on in our marriage, right after I graduated from junior college, we had bought a van, a Dodge van, and my husband and my dad outfitted it as a camper inside. So after I graduated, we took off when we spent 4 weeks driving to California and going to all the national parks and all that for 4 weeks and back home again. We went to England in 1981 while my husband was still working. We went to Europe. We had a Eurail pass. We were gone for 5 weeks. I left my daughter with my parents, and we traveled all over. We were into genealogy, and my husband, we went to East Germany. It was before the wall came down. My husband had a pen pal in Leipzig, and he had my husband's family, Schmidt, last name's German, and he was doing research on his family, and his grandfather was from Dresden, and he wanted to see Dresden, so we went there, and we went to Denmark and Sweden and England, met all my family. So we traveled a lot. Before we retired, we traveled a lot. After he retired, we've gone to Europe quite a few times. Let's see. We went to Israel and Jordan in 2008 with a group from our church, and we took both of our children with us. And then we went on a 16-day cruise up the Amazon River, and stopped in some of the islands in the Caribbean. And the lady that we would never have, life is so interesting. Every one of the things I've told you, how things have worked, it's given to you, and you have that opportunity, and you take it or you leave it. But just walking over to meet my friend Shoba, that was just synchronicity, So when we were down there taking care of my parents, I would have to go to Publix, and I walked past a travel agent. And she had this sign in the window about an Amazon trip. And I knew my husband would love that. So I went home and told him about it. And then we went and looked at it. And we just figured out how, my sisters, we could get around my dad and my mom. And so we went never been on a cruise before, 16-day cruise, sink or swim, up the Amazon River and back down. And the lady who was the travel agent, her husband was an engineer, and so my husband and her husband hit it off. And we had a lovely friendship with this couple. And we went to Alaska with them. We went to Hawaii with them. We went to Tahiti for our 40th wedding anniversary with them. And became really good friends, you know, with these people. She was the kind of person who, it was always a group of people that were on the trip together. She always, you know, booked a huge crowd of people, but we were just one of them among them. But we really, so we, you know, we went to birthday parties and we were, you know, friends with them. And so we've traveled then, let's see, the last trip, we've been for our 50th anniversary, we went on a river cruise on the Danube River. And then we went on a Panama Canal cruise from the village. Every year they go on a cruise somewhere. So I've traveled a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. I was going to ask you for your most, you know, memorable trip, like of all the trips to Europe and, you know, different parts of the world. What would you consider to be the most exciting, maybe, or most memorable?
That's a good question. Each one of them is unique and different. And I'm doing my cultural thing, you know, going to Tahiti and stuff like that. I don't know that I could tell you anyway. I enjoyed doing all of them. I was a shy person, and so you know, going to these different places and interacting with people was, you know, I enjoyed it. Well, when I was in junior college, I took German, and so my professor never spoke a word of English. She was American, but she never spoke a word of English, and she made all of her explanations in German. So my ears were tuned to German. I couldn't speak it. I was too intimidated to try. So before we went to Germany the first time, we had the German teacher from the high school come to our house once a week so that my husband could learn. So he would try to feebly speak German, and I could understand what they were saying so that I could translate back. So we made a team of that. I don't know. He has family in Germany that, I mean, I don't know if in 1981 when we went to visit all of our family, and you know, I had family still in England from my grandmother with all of her children, and then my husband's family, he had family members in Germany that were still alive, and meeting family and connecting with them, I think, was good. And we had a foreign exchange student too. When my son left for college, okay, we have an extra bedroom, and I'd always wanted to have an exchange student, so we applied for an exchange student, and we got Gunhild, who was from Norway, and she was my wild Viking child. She lived with us for a year, and when she came, she was stumbling over her English. But when she left, she sounded like an American teenager. And that was really an interesting year to have her. She was a very stubborn girl, and she didn't have any curfews or anything back in Norway. They were free to do whatever they wanted to. So she had to learn to live under our curfew rules. But she played on the soccer team, and she made friends, and we're still in contact with her, and so. We went to visit her one time when we were over there in Germany. She went back to Norway, graduated from high school, went to Mannheim, Germany, graduated from college there, married a German man, and lives there.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
What was it like reconnecting with family in England when you went back? What was that experience like for you?
It was very good. I had a pen pal. One of my cousins, who was my age, had been a pen pal when I was a kid. We had written back and forth, but you know, at the time you get to be a teenager, and we dropped that. But later on, I became a pen pal with a man who was my father's age. He was a cousin of, but he was my dad's age, and so we wrote to him back and forth, and then we decided we were going to go over there, and he was so gracious and so wonderful. He got all the people together that we wanted to see, or he thought we wanted to see. And he knew we were doing genealogy, and he got all these people together so that we could meet them. We stayed in his sister's house. She lived on a farm. They had a dairy farm. And it was all in that area where my grandfather was from. And we got to go to the island where he was born and see the church my grandmother went to. And, you know, it was very, very nice. And that was 1981. And he was very gracious. He didn't have any children of his own. So he really glommed on to our son. And later on, we went back for a second time. And, he was in love with my daughter. But what he did was he got his lawn really nice and green in the backyard. And he mowed our names into the grass. So when we went in the backyard, there was our names.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
So creative,
It's beautiful.
Wow.
So Herbert was a really special man. And even though he wasn't my generation, we got along really well. He was just a really nice man. He had no children, so he had a wife, but, they didn't have any children. And so he was very nice.
Wow. It's beautiful. So back to the question about retirement. At what point did you decide to, stay in a retirement home, and what were like the plans you had to put in place for this?
Well, because of our experience with my parents, we knew that we had to make plans. And we looked around where we lived, different facilities, but we had to evacuate one time for a hurricane. And we came to Gainesville, and my sister lives here. She was out of town, so we used her condo while we had to evacuate. And I watched my husband put up the shutters. I watched him take them down. The fence had a problem, and it was hot and wet and humid. And, you had to get everything back together again. Our house wasn't destroyed or anything, but it was just minor things. But I saw him out there perspiring and struggling. I said, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing this again. We're getting away from this. And we said, our family, my sister lives in Gainesville. Our son lives in Gainesville. He had gotten information from the one, Okamak, because he was a graduate. Then when they started up, they sent it to everybody. And so we went and looked at Okamak, and we toured it a couple of times and asked all the questions. And then I Googled to see what else was in Gainesville and found the village. And so we came to the village and we looked around, and we really liked the fact that it was a month-to-month rental and you didn't have to put down that big pot of gold. And we just liked the way it looked, and we asked a million questions, and finally decided, in 2017, we put our house on the market and we came up here. And it was, we had the last Christmas at home for the kids and the grandchildren, and everybody knew we were moving. And it was hard for our kids because that's the only home that they knew. But, so we came up here because of family being here, for one thing. And then, oh my gosh, we've met so many wonderful people here. It's just, and I love all the lectures, all the music, and the Phillips Center. And we always went to the Performing Arts Center at home. And this felt like home, and the staff here is wonderful. They're so wonderful. They're so well trained. And, it's very nice. The rent keeps going up every year, but and COVID was very difficult here because we had to shut down completely. We weren't allowed to go out.
So what was that experience like for you and your husband?
It was hard, very hard. My sister, we couldn't go to the grocery store. My sister would go to the grocery store. I'd send her an email with the grocery list. And then she would drop the stuff off at the gate. And then I would go pick it up. And I was so grateful that she was able to do that. And just everything shutting down, the things that we were used to doing, gathering for this and that and the other. Our meals were delivered for a while. And then we were able to go and get them in a central area, but we no longer had the social aspect of sitting down with friends and having a meal. So it was very hard, very hard. And I found myself getting anxious again, like I was when I was a kid, afraid to engage with anybody because I didn't know if they had COVID or not. I mean, everybody felt that way. But it was difficult.
So, what are what are some of the things you enjoy most about being here at the village? Like, what are the fun things you look forward to doing?
Okay, I'm in an improv class, which I really enjoy. It's once a week. It's on Monday. I didn't go today because you were coming, because I didn't think I could work it in. Anyway, improv class is a lot of fun. I've been doing it since they had it come here. The lady that is the facilitator takes it at the senior center, so she learned about improv there. So now she comes here and does it for us. So it's fun. Anytime we have a lot of musicians and different musical things, they come here. And I like them. There's one man that I particularly like, Dan Flock. He plays the guitar like you've never heard. He was in a band with Johnny Cash, and he was a professional musician. And he can sing just like Johnny Cash. You close your eyes, you think he's Johnny Cash. Oh my God, he is so wonderful. Anytime he's here, we have to sign up for everything. You can't just walk in.
Yeah.
I take lectures, great courses. They have a great courses lecture right now. We're doing an art, great masters of art. So I get to see all this, and the professor's really cool. And what else do I do? Improv. Well, I go to. There's a lady called Barbara Oberlander. She used to be a professor at Santa Fe, and she comes once a month and gives us talk. And you hang on every word. I mean, she's so beautifully prepared, and she's so good. And she's doing a series on the first ladies of the United States right now, and she does a series on different things. But everybody just loves her talks. She's just wonderful. And you have to sign up right on the day you find out she's coming, because you won't get in. And I've done some craft things here too. The lady, we have a woman that is on the staff that does crafts and arts and crafts and all that stuff. And there's day trips that you could take. We haven't gone on some of them recently, but before COVID, we did go on some of the day trips that went different places. We went to see the Van Gogh display in Jacksonville, and a Monet's coming up. We're going to do that. And then they take a busload of people over there for a day and come back. And so anything I can, learn about, I'm still learning. And the other thing I do is when I was back home, I was part of a writing group that we met in the library once a week. And we are giving prompts to write from. So we would write, and then everybody would read what they had written. And then I moved away, but then COVID came along, and guess what? They started doing it online. So now I'm back in the group, and I have been, and she's still doing it online because she said, I don't have to get dressed up to go to the library. I'm happy doing it here at home. So we do it online now. So every Wednesday I do that, Yeah. So I really enjoy that, my writing group. It's fun. Yeah. Our son is a writer, and he's well known in Gainesville for his stuff. He's a poet, and he performs sometimes at different venues, and he works for the at the Civic Media Center. So he's always been a person who would like to protest. He did a lot of protesting. He went all over the place protesting, and just being a hippie after he graduated from college, he just wandered.
Yeah, so it seems like you have still a lot of connection with life in Gainesville outside of the village.
Yeah,
have family and
I like to go to art festivals anytime there's an art festival or something. I like to do that. So, yeah.
Sounds exciting. Is there any challenge you face as a resident at the village, or like anything that could be improved on, or anything you would sort of suggest to improve life here at the village?
I don't really think so.
Okay.
We have a resident council that you can attend, and they do a lot of things here. And I used to go to all the meetings, but I've kind of backed away after, we didn't have them during COVID, so I never really got back into the swing of it. But so if you have a problem, you can voice it there because the management is there. Our management's very transparent. They're very helpful. And if they think that you have a valid reason for wanting to change something or do something different, they do listen. And then they will come back with an answer. And sometimes it's not feasible to change whatever, and they tell you why. They're very transparent. So we are blessed with management here, believe me.
Thank you. Before we go into the last section, I think I missed out on something I thought to ask you about. So it's about is there any historical events that you sort of experienced that impacted your life, or that sort of, you find, memorable for you?
I guess one thing I haven't touched on is back in Merritt Island where I live. I lived in my house there for 44 years. So I was entrenched in the community, and I belonged to a church there, and I got involved in the church at a time when I needed to be validated. There was a pastor there who saw me as a capable person at a time when I didn't feel very capable, and so he put me on a committee, and then I served on every committee at the church over the years except one. And so that was a very good experience. I met a lot of wonderful people. A lot of the people were engineers affiliated with the Space Center, of course, and I really went through lots of different ministers and different things. And one of the things I served on the building committee for 8 years. We were trying to decide to build something, and it took 8 years to talk it out every month. Anyway, we decided on building an administration and education building. And I thought, oh, this is something I really want to do. So my pastor said, do you want to stay on the committee? Being a woman, you get looked down at if you want to do something like that. And I said, sure, I want to stay on the committee. So I went to all the architects' meeting. And then when it was being constructed, I went to all the meetings with the manager of the construction. So I learned about what's inside a building and all the, but the architects were very nice. They treated me just like equal. But the person who was the head of the building committee didn't like me. I had to fight him all the way because I was a woman, and what did I know? The attitude. So I had my own hard hat with my name on it so I could go on the construction site. and so I really enjoyed it. The building is very, very nice. It's 33,000 square feet, 2 stories. And I learned a lot about that kind of thing, and not something I'd looked at. Yeah, I want to do this. But I had seen a woman on the building committee for the sanctuary, and I said, I want to do that. Next time there's a building that goes up on this campus, I'm going to be there. And I was. And another thing I did, I went on a mission trip to Cuba with my pastor and 2 other women. I didn't speak any Spanish. I was terrified, really terrified. But I went anyway. And I spent a week in Cuba, stayed in the pastor's home down there. And they were very gracious. They spoke English. He spoke good English, but his wife was, she said, after we washed the dishes one night, she says, we talk. And I thought, well, how are we going to talk? So we gestured, Anyway, it's quite but I had one man there who was he spoke English perfectly. He was the person who taught the tour guides. Other countries could go to Cuba and enjoy it. In our country, you couldn't go there except, there's a big wall there. But anyway, there were tour guides that, shepherded people from Canada and Europe around. And he taught them how to speak English. This was his job. And another synchron, he and his wife moved to the United States a few years later. They settled in Tennessee, where we had family. So we got to see them in the United States after they came over here. And our church wasn't the only church that went down there, but we took all kinds of, over-the-counter medicine and toothbrushes and just things they couldn't get. You went in the store and there was nothing on the shelves. It was horrible. And, but they lived their lives by learning how to get around the government, There was a black market there. If you needed something, you could get it if you paid enough. So when we went down, we paid room and board. And they used that money to feed us because they wouldn't have been able to afford to feed us if we didn't bring money, So that was an eye-opening experience. We went out into the community around, this was Holguin. It's a big, the second largest city in Cuba. It's close to Guantanamo Bay. And we went out into the area around it where the pastors, they had the little tiny church, and the people were very poor. So we got to see all these different communities and different pastors and different things. So that was good. So I.
Thank you for sharing that. So moving on to the last section of the interview, what are you most grateful for in life generally, or about life?
I guess my husband. We're going to celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary this year.
Oh, wow.
And plus we knew each other for a long time before we got married. So, we still love each other and still are together. And, we've been through a lot together, ups and downs, So I guess I'm most grateful for him and sticking by me and and I think that my husband.
And looking forward, what are you looking forward to the most?
Trying to stay healthy and not get ill. Trying to eat right and exercise and do things that'll help me stay on my feet, and mental acuity and senility is in my family's history, and my grandfather had it, my uncle had it, my mom had it, and I don't really want to go down that path, and so I'm trying to do things to keep myself from going down that path, but you never know. And then, and being able to gracefully age without too many complaints.
What advice would you give to the younger generation based off of your life experience?
I think if you see an opportunity offered to you, take it. You never know what's going to happen. You just don't. It may turn out fine and it may not, but you would have missed something if you hadn't taken something that was offered, or a friendship that you had, or, something, a chance to travel or something like that. Just don't be like this. Be open to other people. You always learn something from someone else, and that's other cultures and people. Be open, love them. Don't turn your head because you are going to miss something that's really important. They've got something to offer to you. That's what I would do.
That's wonderful piece of advice. Is there any advice you would offer about, thinking about retirement generally for like younger people?
Don't spend all your money. Save some money. Have a nice little nest egg there.
Yeah.
Get everything you can to get your finances. 401ks, whatever you can get to get your finances. I was very lucky. My husband worked for a wonderful company for many years. We had a lot of privileges, opportunities to, get 401k and have money to, we have a financial advisor that we got early on through our company, so, don't try to keep up with other people. Yeah, that car might look really nice, but you really don't need it. Don't have to have a fancy house. Live within your means and set some money aside because you never know what's going to happen. I was just grateful to my parents. The property that they owned sold for a nice price. I was able to put my mother and my father into places and pay cash. They had the money for me to take care of them. I didn't have to. With my husband's family, we all had to pitch in so there was money to take care of them. But with my parents, the land that they had, they also owned the farm that my grandparents had had. So when we were able to sell that, then we had money to take care of them. And we were getting pretty close to the end with my mom. It's like, we just please let us have enough money for her to keep her in dignity and take it well taken care of, But money.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything we might have missed out during the course of the interview?
Oh, we didn't talk about my grandchildren.
Oh, true. Yes, we want to hear about them.
We have 4. Our daughter has 2 sons she lives in Auburn, Alabama. And she has Jackson and Daniel. And Jackson is 14, going to be 15, good age, but he's a good kid. And then there's Daniel, who's 7, and he's a piece of work. And we don't see them very often because they live in Alabama, but we make an effort to get up there. And our daughter comes here usually twice a year with the kids, and we try to support them. Just we're not the kind of grandparents like cuddly, and be there all the time. And we didn't move up there because we considered moving up there when we got the first grandchild, but we didn't want to give up our life to go up there and just, So we see them and we enjoy them, and then we have 2 other grandchildren that live in Maryland. Our son was the sperm donor for a couple that were unable to have their own children. So we have Elsie, who is 15, and Leo, who's 11, and they live in Maryland. And we don't see them maybe once a year, but we keep up with them on Facebook. We know what they're doing. And Elsie, his mother, grew up in Gainesville, so she comes to Gainesville to see her family. So we have a nice tie because, that's where my son met her. And she sings. She's a voice. Her mother was in a choir, and her grandmother taught opera here at the university. So Elsie sings, and she's in a play, a musical production at her high school. She goes to a performing arts high school. So nice. And so that's, and Leo is a strange little one. He has some emotional problems, but he has someone helping him. He has, they've had to put him out of public school and into a sort of a free sort of school, where the kids could work at what they wanted to when they wanted to, and not under a lot of rules. He was there for a year or 2, and now he's back in public school. But he had some trouble, sitting still and listening and that sort of thing. He's just kind of an introvert, very introverted, and doesn't engage with the world a lot. Where Elsie's like His sister's all over the place. She won't shut her mouth. But anyway, so those are our 4 grandchildren. But we're not right where they are, but we do see them and know what they're doing through Facebook.
Oh, that's great. Is there any other thing you would like to share?
I thought I would pinch your ear enough. I don't even know what time it is. Oh my God, it's almost 3 o'clock.
Wow.
I can't believe that I ran my mouth for that long. I really am a quiet person most of the time. Another thing I do here is the book club. I like to read, so there's a nice book club here. But anyway.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to create another file.
Okay. So I guess now we could do the pictures.
So
That's my grandparents on my dad's side, Alfred and Ellen Maria. I'm named after Ellen Maria, of course. And her mother was Ellen Maria also, so there's 3. This is me as a baby.
Oh.
I'm 2 months
cute.
old. And this is me when I'm 2 years old. It's me and my dad. This is my grandfather that I love so much, that we lived with. And that's when he was living with us, and it was about a year before he died.
and his name?
It was Alfred Hume. That devastated me. It was the biggest loss to me, that he was really special. Let's see if there's, I'll just let you see my other grandparents. These are Charlie and Bessie Taylor. This is my mother's family, my grandparents and all the kids. And I like this one. This is my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. And this is also, but I made the cake. I took cake decorating class and made a lot of cakes. And this is, I don't know if you can get this or not, but this is my favorite picture of myself.
Oh, so lovely.
When I was, it was 1989. I was a lot younger.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
We have to do this one. This is my life's blood. The rocket that my husband worked on.
Worked on.
He launched 114, or 112, I guess it was, rockets.
Wow.
And he was the launch conductor on 12. He's the one who did the countdown on 12 of them. Wow. He was made a manager, so he was the manager of the launch pad, and he did well. So
That's amazing.
he was the kind of person who didn't like being put into being a manager either. But he did it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your patience in listening to my mouth.
We enjoyed it.
So I would like to call on J.N. Fishwork, who is a poet, a freelance writer, and editor of Writers Alliance of Gainesville's annual Bicopa Literary Review. He is the author of 3 chapbooks of poetry and postcards from Darklands, ekphatic poems accompanying artworks by artist George Ibanez. His most recent chapbook is Beast of the Wood, Swamp Ideals and Cedar Songs, 2020 to 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Fishwork.
Thank you, Dr. Coley. And thank you to everyone for being here and for inviting poets from the Gainesville community to participate. I really appreciate that. If you're looking for more poetry in your life at any point, you can join us on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. at the Civic Media Center down on South Main Street, just south of downtown Gainesville, for the Thursday Night Poetry Jam. It's an open mic reading. Everybody's welcome. All styles invited. If it's art made out of words, it's welcome there. And that's the home of many Gainesville poets, local Gainesville poets. My piece today is entitled, Mama Walked Away. COVID got my mama 2 years into the plague in the winter of 2022. You could say she got lucky. We got lucky. You could say it got her, but it didn't take her. It didn't take her away from us the way it took so many other people's mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, longtime companions, intimate friends, buddies, pals, playmates, homies, neighbors, acquaintances, smoke break chatters, and water cooler familiars from work. You could say she had it easy. She got to live. She got up out of the sick bed, her own bed even. Not some anonymous hospital bed shared by however many dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of others. Over the course of years, I looked it up. They say the average hospital bed lasts 5 to 7 years. Swathed in sheets, cleaned however many hundreds or thousands of times. She got up out of her own sick bed, in her own home, and walked. She walked away from the reaching, grasping reality, from even the possibility of ICU, intubation, machine monitoring, robot respiration, the antiseptic specter of blood clots, oxygen deprivation, heart attack, multiple organ failure, hospital death. My mama walked away, but she did not get off easy. She did not walk steady. She did not walk well. Oh, she got off easy by comparison, maybe. When compared to the hundreds of thousands whom we lost and the thousands upon thousands more who are still sick years later. Like my hometown friend Jay, who died in October 2020, quadriplegic with MS in a nursing home, one of so very many we lost that way. Or Kay, who lost her job, lost her house, lost her energy and so much time, months, years, nearly lost her will to live, who still has a hard path to struggle down to reach full recovery. Yeah, my mama walked away, but not the easy way. It got into her muscles, into her bones, that bug, little spiked balls of destruction, rolling thunder through the busy spaces where the everyday work of embodied existence was trying to ramp back up, trying to reassemble and live, revive. Minuscule molecular crowns of thorns, sparking nerves, sapping muscles, stiffening joints. I'm all stove up, she told the docs. Can't hardly get down on the floor to do my morning exercises. Can't hardly get back up. It tried to take her legs, her hips, the primary focus of her locomotion, her self-propelled way through this world, her self-determination, just like it did to so very, very many others. And it held on long, long after the lung butter hacking, fever, no energy, ache of the main frontal assault had passed. It hung on and fought a rear guard guerrilla war, a war of attrition deep in the mesh of my mama's body, far from her ears, nose, throat, and lungs. She fought back with stretching, exercise, and doctor visits, medications, and physical therapy. She fought back with slow and steady determination and, surely, a bit of luck, what some folks might call a blessing. But she was able to fight back because she and my daddy did their time under the pandemic regimen right, to the best of their ability. They locked down tight in their apartment. I didn't get to hug either one of them for over 6 months. And they went and got the vaccines as soon as each new dose came available. They wore their masks long past the point where it was fashionable or even socially acceptable. So my mama had a baseline, a redoubt, a fortress of health to stand and fight from. And she got better. My mama's back to walking these days, back to getting around on her own as she always has for 8 decades. But it was not a given, and it was not easy. My mama is a tough woman. You might not think so just to see her. All 5 foot nothing and kind, bright eyes, colorful print blouses, comfy shoes, easy, infectious laugh. She might not seem so tough, but she muscled through the pain, the debilitating, confusing lack of cooperation from her own muscles, the new waver that haunted her every effort to walk. She had to work. She had to fight. She had to have help. Doctors, nurses, PAs, physical therapists, exams, tests, meds, movement, exercise, trial and error, all of it. Just as it's been every step of our stumbling way through this plague. And eventually, COVID gave up, retreated, just enough. She is walking now, about as well as she was able before COVID reached into her and made that most basic human function a trial by fire. It was 2 years into the plague when COVID got hold of my mama. You could say she got lucky. We got lucky. She was lucky to only catch a mild case, lucky to get it late when the virus had burned through its most violent, murderous, maiming mutations, when the collective human immune system had reshaped it into something that the incautious and ill-advised wanted to write off as nothing more than another variation on the common cold or flu. You could say she got lucky. We got lucky. And you wouldn't be wrong. But it takes a whole lot more than dumb luck for any of us, for all of us. You, me, my mama, to get up from where COVID laid so many of us so low for so long and walk away. Thanks, y'all.